Imagine a world completely different from what we know today. A world where giant beings walked the earth with such force and presence that humans could barely comprehend. This was the planet Earth before the flood, and these giant beings were known as Nephilim. They are among the greatest mysteries of the Bible and the flood. But who were they? Where did they come from? And most importantly, what do they have to do with a flood that almost exterminated the human race? Many of us know the story of Noah and his ark. But what if I told you that in Noah's time, the main cause of the flood was these monsters? The story of the Nephilim is an invitation to explore a period of human history that seems almost mythical. It is a theme that provokes fascination, fear, and many questions. Throughout this video, we will unravel the layers of this mystery. We will explore who the Nephilim were, how they influenced the world with evil practices, and why God decided to intervene with such a drastic event that almost exterminated the human race. But before moving forward, I want you to reflect with me. If these giants really existed, what does that mean for our understanding of the world? Did the scriptures hide this part of history from us? That is what we will discover today. So watch this video until the end to not miss any detail. I promise you will leave this video with knowledge that few possess. I invite you to dive into one of the most mysterious and impactful chapters of scriptures, the untold story behind the flood. Before we understand who the Nephilim were, we need to go back in time and visualize the world in which they emerged. The earth before the flood was a completely different place than we know today. According to the Bible, the earth was controlled by a distinct natural order. For example, the book of Genesis mentions that there was no rain as we know it today. Instead, a mist would rise from the ground and water the entire soil. Genesis 2 verse 5 and 6. And during that time, humans lived much longer than we do today. Genesis 5 says that people like Methuselah lived for hundreds of years, something that seems incredible to our modern eyes, especially since today the average human lifespan is around 80 years. But back then, people lived for over 400 years. However, not everything was perfect in this scenario. Humanity was also on a path of moral corruption. Genesis 6 verse 5 describes that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This is a dark environment before the arrival of the Nephilim, a world that was already taken by chaos and violence. This world the people lived in before the flood already shows us why God decided to put an end to it. It was not just the presence of Nephilim. It was human rebellion, spiritual apostasy, and the distancing from God. What makes this period even more intriguing is how it relates to our current reality. It is as if the story of the flood is an eternal warning, a mirror to make us reflect on the paths we choose to follow. Now, it is time to dive into the mystery surrounding the Nephilim. The Bible briefly mentions these beings, but the description is enough to leave more questions and answers. The main passage we have about the Nephilim is in Genesis verse 1 to 4, which says the following. When men began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives to themselves from all whom they chose. In those days, the Nephilim were on the earth, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown. The interpretation of this passage has generated debates for centuries and continues to provoke great discussions among scholars, theologians, and Christians. One of the most well-known theories is that the sons of God mentioned in Genesis were fallen angels, celestial beings who, due to their disobedience and rebellion, fell, led by Lucifer, the angel who, in his arrogance, wanted to challenge divine authority and rebelled against the Creator. Lucifer was expelled from heaven along with a third of the angels, who became the fallen angels, as stated in Revelation 12 and 4. This theory suggests that during the period before the flood, these fallen angels did not remain confined to the spiritual realm. They physically descended to earth and took on human forms to mingle with people without being recognized. In Genesis 6 verse 4, it is said that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took wives to themselves from all they chose. In other words, the fallen angels, upon seeing that the women of the earth were beautiful, wanted to reproduce with them. But it was not just for sexual relations. The purpose of this reproduction was much darker than it seems. This union between the fallen angels and human women gave rise to a lineage that was a mixture of two different types of beings. The Nephilim, who were described as imposing and powerful creatures, often translated as giants in some versions of the Bible. They were neither completely human nor entirely celestial, but they had both earthly and supernatural characteristics. This would explain their extraordinary strength, abilities, and physical appearance different from humans. Lucifer is one of the most important characters in this chaotic scenario, as his fall and the rebellion of the fallen angels compare the corruption of the earth. Just as Lucifer, in his attempt to be equal to God, led other angels into rebellion, the Nephilim represent the manifestation of this evil on earth, a mix of the divine and human, in a way that went against God's plan for creation. Lucifer's plan was simple. He wanted at all costs to be equal to God, which is why he was expelled from heaven. But even after being expelled, he did not stop. But where did he get the idea to reproduce with the human race? Now I want you to pay close attention to understand where he got this idea. Jesus is the answer. When God sent his only Son to die for humanity, Jesus was not a simple man. He was God himself in human form. Jesus was God. He had the Holy Spirit flowing through his veins. But do you remember how Jesus came into the world? Jesus was born like any normal person. He came from a woman's womb. And Lucifer is a very clever angel. He realized that just as God could put his spirit into a normal human being, he could also do that, and thus came the Nephilim, the sons of Satan. In other words, just as Jesus was the Son of God, the Nephilim were the sons of the devil. By trying to corrupt humanity through the Nephilim, Lucifer was directly attacking God's creation, trying to destroy the bond between humanity and the Creator. The result was a corrupted world where evil dominated and sin spread like cancer. The Nephilim were not just powerful individuals. They influenced entire cultures. They were the men of renown, heroes who used their strength and dominion to control everyone and promote a society marked by violence and oppression. This scenario helps us understand why God described the earth as full of violence, Genesis 6 verse 11. Many scriptures that are not in the Bible, such as the book of Enoch, expand on this story, describing that the fallen angels taught humans forbidden knowledge like magic, astrology, and the making of weapons. Although these texts are not considered canonical, they offer a fascinating view of how the ancients understood the influence of the Nephilim and their angelic parents. But why is all this important? And why should we know this? Because the presence of Nephilim symbolizes how far humanity and the spiritual world had strayed from God's original plan. They represent an attempt to mix the sacred with profane, resulting in a land where violence, pride, and corruption dominated. The impact of the Nephilim was so profound that it led God to declare in Genesis 6 verse 3, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever." This gives us a clue that their presence was one of the factors that accelerated the occurrence of the flood. You might know a Nephilim who appeared in one of the most famous moments of the Bible, in the book of Samuel. Goliath, a giant Philistine who challenged the Israelites, was one of these giants, and he was defeated by David. If you want a video about this battle between David and Goliath, comment below, and we will bring you a video of this complete battle like you've never seen before. Now that we know who the Nephilim were and where they came from, We are ready to explore the devastating impact they had on the world before the flood. The Nephilim were agents of chaos who increased the degradation of the earth. To fully understand this impact, we need to explore how these giants influenced the culture and morality of the population. The Bible gives us clues about this devastation caused by the Nephilim. Genesis 6 verse 11 and 12 describes that the earth was corrupt in God's sight and filled with violence. Imagine a society where beings of supernatural size and power dominated everything. These giants likely held positions of influence and authority, whether by force, fear, or even the idolatry they could inspire. They might have been seen as gods or demigods by humans who bowed to their physical superiority. This distorted worship further fed the spiritual corruption of the time. Additionally, the violence they promoted was not limited to themselves. The Book of Enoch relates that the fallen angels taught humans how to manipulate God's creation, creating aberrations among animals and humans. Another crucial aspect of the impact of the Nephilim was how they destroyed human morality. The pre-flood society was already estranged from God, but the presence of Nephilim accelerated this process. They brought a culture of domination, selfishness, and exploitation. This era was certainly one of the worst that ever existed on Earth. And you might be wondering why God allowed this to happen. Could he not simply destroy these giants or the fallen angels? The answer may lie in the concept of free will. God created both angels and humans with the ability to choose their own paths, and this freedom resulted in choices that challenged God's purpose. However, as we will see next, God also prepared a plan to restore the earth and end this corrupted world. While the earth was sinking into darkness, God's heart was grieved, but he was not willing to abandon his creation completely. Genesis 6 verse 5 and 6. In his infinite wisdom and mercy, God decided to reveal to Noah the divine plan for the flood. The first time Noah heard God's voice announcing the catastrophe was a moment of great transformation. He was alone on a normal day when the Lord called him, revealing the great destruction that was approaching. God said to Noah, "Noah, listen to my words. The end of all flesh has come before me. For the earth is filled with violence because of men, and behold, I will destroy them along with the earth. I will make a flood of waters to destroy all flesh in which there is a breath of life under heaven. Everything on earth shall perish." Noah knelt in reverence and fear and said, "Lord, what do you want me to do? How can I be useful to your will?" God responded, "Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window and a door, and you shall make a lower, second, and third deck." Noah remained silent, absorbing the instructions, but with an expression concerned, he asked, "Lord, will there truly be total destruction? Will no man be spared?" And God replied, "Men have filled the earth with violence. Everything on it will be destroyed, but I will establish my covenant with you. You, your wife, your sons, and their wives shall enter the ark. Of every kind of animal, you shall bring a pair, male and female, to keep them alive. Bring also provision for yourself and for them." Noah, still kneeling with tears in his eyes, said to the Lord, "Lord, I will do all that you commanded, but give me strength to fulfill your will." These words marked the beginning of a grand mission. God guided Noah with precision on how the ark should be built, the largest vessel ever seen, with exact dimensions. The ark was to be a sturdy structure capable of withstanding the torrential waters of the flood and keeping safe all the living creatures that God had determined to save. Imagine Noah, a man who feared God, receiving these instructions at a time when technology and construction knowledge were very simple. with the help of his family, he began working on the ark. Each wooden plank, each nail driven in, was a step toward fulfilling God's promise. But the challenge was just beginning. While Noah and his sons worked hard, the gaze of the population was one of mockery. The sight of Noah raising a gigantic vessel on dry land was incomprehensible to many. The land had never seen anything like it. After all, who would need a boat in a dry land that barely had any water? People laughed, questioned Noah's sanity, saying he was crazy. But Noah continued undaunted, believing that his obedience to the Lord would bring salvation. His wife was a woman of faith, but had her own fears and questions. She saw her husband spending hours building the ark, but also saw the skeptical and mocking looks from people. His sons, who were called by God to help, also had their own challenges. Each one's life was being sacrificed for a plan that no one else seemed to understand. The work was arduous, but each day the structure took shape, and Noah's and his family's faith grew stronger. The construction of the ark was not just a physical and laborious mission. It was a spiritual journey, a way to build trust in God. The Bible does not say exactly how long Noah took to build the ark, but in Genesis 6 verse 3, it is mentioned that God would give humans 120 years before the flood happened. The most common interpretation is that Noah took about 120 years to build the ark, and this period also served for him to preach and warn people about God's judgment. After years of hard work, the ark was finished. Noah and his family gathered around it, and God spoke again to him. "Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean animal, you shall take 7 pairs, a male and his female, and the animals are not clean, a male and his female. Also of the birds of the heavens, 7 pairs, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth." Noah raised his hands in prayer and said, "Lord, thank you for your guidance. We are ready to obey." God also revealed how the animals should enter the ark. He ordered Noah to gather a sample of all species of animals, both clean and unclean, a male and a female of each. This was an even more impressive task, because Noah did not need to go after the animals. The hand of God would guide the animals to the ark. And when the moment came, something even more extraordinary happened. God ordered that animals of all species begin to gather. The scene that unfolded was a visible miracle of divine order. Animals of all shapes and sizes began to approach the ark. Imagine the scene. Large herds of elephants, tigers, majestic lions, giraffes, exotic birds, small rodents, and even tiny insects made their way to the vessel that Noah had built with so much effort, all being guided by the Lord, entering calmly into the ark as if they were on a divinely orchestrated mission. Each species in an almost supernatural way made its way to the great boat, and one by one they entered the ark. Birds flew to the openings. Land animals marched up ramps made by Noah. The sound of hooves on the ground, the beating of wings, the symphony of nature's sounds mixed with the wind's sound, as if the entire creation was breathing with expectation. After they were all in the ark, God said again to Noah, "For 7 more days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the earth. Stay inside the ark until I call you again." Inside the ark, the scene was somewhat chaotic, but also filled with divine calm. The animals were there, safe, but coexistence was challenging. Imagine a small space and all the creatures together, but by some providence of God's mystery, they coexisted in harmony. No violence, no predators and prey. The people who mocked Noah, seeing the animals entering the ark, might have begun to question what was happening. How could those wild and peaceful animals follow each other in line to a single place. The divine intervention was visible to all, yet few believed. The promise of the flood was about to be fulfilled, but people remained indifferent. When all the animals were inside the ark, the door was shut by God. It was not Noah who closed it, but the hand of the Lord who sealed the vessel. The ark was complete. Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives were inside, ready to face the divine judgment that was to come. God had chosen them for a new beginning. But what would come next was something no human had ever experienced. The population's reaction was one of total disbelief. But there was nothing more they could do. The time for repentance had run out, and the flood was imminent. The flood was a catastrophic event described as the breaking of the great deep and the opening of the windows of heaven, as described in Genesis 7 verse 11. Imagine the chaos. Waters gushing from underground springs and from above, flooding the earth with relentless violence. The sound of water sweeping away everything in its path, like the roar of creation itself, echoed across the earth's four corners. Trees, mountains, animals, and structures vanished amid the overwhelming torrent of water. The world that once breathed life was now consumed by death, a sea of destruction from which nothing escaped. But amid this catastrophe, Noah's Ark rose like a fortress of hope. It floated on the murky waters, not because it was a human work, but by God's grace. Noah and his family were protected, not by their works, but by trust and obedience to God. They were safe because they believed in God's plan, even when no one else seemed to believe. Here is the full translation with the addition you requested at the end. Inside the ark, the emotional pressure on Noah and his family could not be underestimated. It was an experience that challenged their faith. They were surrounded by a world in destruction, far from everything they knew. The solitude and silence of the waters became their companions as they awaited what seemed to be the end of an era. The animals, despite being far from their natural habitats, were also under God's protection. Imagine how lions, normally predators, coexisted with lambs on the same vessel, without a single attack. The birds, once free to fly, now found themselves in a closed but safer environment. Somehow, in a mysterious way, God's hand maintained peace within the ark. Even amidst the sound of animals and the roar of waters, there was a harmony that could only be explained by divine grace. Just as creation was made through the separation of waters, God now used the waters to separate evil from goodness. The earth, covered by impetuous waters, was being renewed, prepared for a new beginning. After the first days of the flood, Noah observed the waters that still covered the land. But something inside him said that the end was near. He knew that hope still existed. Determined to find sign, he released a dove for the first time, watching it disappear into the vastness of the waters. What he hoped for was that the dove would return with some sign that the waters were receding. The silence that followed was heavy. Each second seemed like an eternity, but then something happened. The dove returned, and in its beak, it carried an olive leaf. Noah's heart raced. It was a sign that the waters were receding, that the land was revealing itself again. With renewed faith, Noah released the dove once more, waiting anxiously. But this time, the dove did not return. And it was at that moment that Noah knew the land was dry, ready to be inhabited again. The end of the flood was finally within reach. Noah looked at his family, their faces tired but full of hope. They were ready to leave the ark, but the wait was not yet over. The silence of the waters still echoed within the great vessel. For days, Noah waited, praying and reflecting, waiting for the moment that God would determine. Finally, when the waters began to recede completely and the mountains and valleys became visible again, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, and Noah heard God's voice calling him. "Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife, your sons, and their wives. Let the animals go out too, so that they may spread over the earth and be fruitful and multiply. Noah knelt before the open door of the ark and said to God, Lord, your mercy has sustained us. I praise you for your faithfulness. God then said to Noah and his family, I will set my bow in the clouds as a sign of the covenant I make with you and with every living creature. Never again will I destroy the earth with floodwaters. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Noah, his family, and the animals were ready to start over, restoring what had been lost. The rainbow became the visible sign of the covenant, reminding everyone that despite the judgment, God's mercy always prevails. The world was now before them, not corrupted but clean, ready to be rebuilt under God's guidance. This divine response to the chaos caused by the Nephilim is a powerful lesson. God not only eliminated evil, but gave humanity a new chance to live in communion with Him. The Nephilim are an example of what happens when divine boundaries are violated, and on the other hand, Noah's story is a metaphor for all of us. Even in the darkest moments, when evil seems to prevail, God's grace still offers a path to salvation and renewal. Noah was not perfect, but his willingness to obey and trust in God was enough to ensure the salvation of his family. And you know what is most curious about this story? Even after the flood and the extermination of everything, humanity did not change, and history repeated itself once more. But this time, God destroyed 2 entire cities with fire and brimstone poured from the sky. That's what you will see in this video that is appearing on the screen now. The story of 2 cities corrupted by sin that God destroyed without mercy. I'll see you there, and may God always be with you. This is eternal promise. He never abandons his people, even in the darkest times. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video to stay updated with more incredible stories.